Hello, I'm Jennifer Childs with Penguin Random House Library Marketing. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our ALA Midwinter Cocktails and Conversations author event co-sponsored with Booklist. We love this event because it gives us the chance to introduce you to some of our favorite authors from our spring list. Enjoy their talks and remember to request their eGalleys on Edelweiss or NetGalley. But before we move on to the main event, let's hear quickly from Donna Seaman of Booklist. She'll introduce you to our speakers today. Over to you, Donna.
Hello, I'm Donna Seaman, Adult Books Editor for Booklist, and I'm honored to be kicking off the first Penguin Random House Cocktails and Conversations event of 2021. Booklist is proud to be a co-sponsor of this exciting gathering of exceptional writers in conjunction with ALA's online Midwinter Conference. We'll be immersed in conversations with 5 writers, each unique, each telling powerful and unnerving stories that deepen our perception of the human experience. Isabel Allende has long been a guiding light, a beloved, versatile, critically acclaimed, and best-selling virtuoso of enrapturing novels, including her most recent, A Long Petal of the Sea. Allende has written a passionate work of nonfiction, a mix of memoir, reflection, and manifesto about what it means to be female. It's titled The Soul of a Woman. It's due out in March, which is Women's History Month, and it's published by Ballantine. A born feminist, Allende writes, "What is my definition of feminism? It is not what we have between our legs, but what we have between our ears. It's a philosophical posture and an uprising against male authority. It's a way of understanding human relations and a way to see the world." Jasmine Mans also helps us see the world and understand our predicaments. A celebrated spoken word poet, a multimedia artist, and a teacher, Mans' first book was Chalk Outlines of Snow Angels. Her second poetry collection, Black Girl Call Home, will appear in March, published by Berkeley. Mans' poems are succinct and powerful and scorchingly candid. Booklist reviewer Alison Escato praises this excellent collection, concluding, delving into heartbreak, community, family, race, queer identity, sexual violence, and feminism, Mans' poems are startling and unforgettable. We will also hear from 3 writers of soon-to-be-published novels. First, the raw facts. That is the first line in JoAnne Tompkins' first novel, What Comes After, an April release from Riverhead. What follows is a quick and chilling description of the search for Daniel, a high school senior, and the discovery of his body. Daniel's best friend, Donna, is driven to a tragic end, and a pregnant 16-year-old finds shelter with Daniel's father, a devout Quaker. Tompkins has created a complex and profoundly affecting tale of life, death, family, and faith. In Booklist starred review, Michael Cart writes, "All of this abundant material is deftly handled by Tompkins. Expect some tears, but also admire the art that Tompkins brings to this exceptional literary thriller." Clay McLeod Chapman is a horror writer. His books include The Remaking. Chapman is also a middle-grade author, a graphic novelist, author of the Marvel comic series Scream, a playwright and a screenwriter. His next book is a true crime-inspired work of horror and psychological suspense, Whisper Down the Lane, coming from Quirk Books in April. It features newly married Richard, an art teacher at his new stepson's elementary school in Virginia in 2013. The novel also reaches back several decades to bring us Sean, a 5-year-old boy who tells a lie about a teacher with dire results. The wrenching story that unfolds is a riveting and diabolically shrewd spin of the infamous satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s, when testimony elicited from children stoked mass hysteria over alleged satanic child abuse. Chapman masterfully works his way to the paranoid, horrifying heart of the matter. And I will conclude with a big, enthralling, century and globe-spanning novel, Great Circle, by Maggie Shipstead. This will be published in May by Knopf. Shipstead is the best-selling author of 2 previous novels, Astonish Me and Seating Arrangements. Great Circle tells the entwined tales of 2 women in 2 different eras. Marion Graves is a daring 1940s aviator who attempts to fly from pole to pole. In the present, actor Hadley Baxter not only hopes to play Marion in a biopic, but also that this role will change her life. Avidly researched and ardently imagined, Shipstead's richly detailed and beautifully descriptive saga encompasses war, exploration, the search for freedom, the promises of Hollywood, and the slipperiness of stories. As we continue to navigate our reduced routines, isolated from so many we long to be with, I'm more grateful than ever for the intimacy of books, for the deep communion with fresh perceptions and new vistas, clarified feelings and inspiring ideas. I'm grateful for the magic language performs, enabling us to lose ourselves in the weave and magic of poetry and stories and transcend the distances between us. I hope you enjoy the program. Stay well.
Hi, this is Jennifer Hershey. I'm Isabel Allende's editor at Valentine Books, and I'm here to talk to her about her new book, The Soul of a Woman. I'm so excited to be with you tonight, Isabel. You're best known for your 15 novels, but you've also written 4 nonfiction books, and The Soul of a Woman is your 5th one. So can you tell us a little bit about The Soul of a Woman?
It's a sort of very personal memoir about me as a woman and as a feminist. I became a feminist when I was like 5 years old. So it's a long run. I'm 78 years old now, and I've seen a lot. And I have seen the feminist movement going forward and back with a backlash and stopping and then getting energized again by a wave of young women. So I thought it was time to tell my own story about it. And the book also is already published in other language, and I'm getting feedback from women readers, especially young ones, that feel that it's their story too in many ways. So I'm happy with the book.
This was one of my favorite parts of the book, was reading about you as a 5-year-old and how fierce you were. Can you tell us a little bit about what about your childhood made you into a feminist at such a young age, even though there wasn't even really a word for it then when you were growing up?
Look, I was born in 1942 in Chile, very socially conservative society, in a very Catholic family, where my grandfather was the patriarch and he was like God. And my mother, who was a señorita, educated to be somebody's wife and somebody's mother, found herself at 25 abandoned by the husband with 3 babies. And she had to go back to live in my grandfather's house, where she had no money, no power, no freedom, nothing. And I grew up in that environment, seeing my mother so vulnerable and not wanting to have a life like hers. Very, very young, I rebelled against all male authority, my grandfather, everybody. And so everybody thought I was a lunatic. I was even taken to the doctor to see if I had some intestinal worms or something that was creating this anger, this terrible anger. Then around puberty, I started realizing that the anger was killing me in a way, because I became very silent, very withdrawn. I would hide behind book covers because I really didn't want to interact with anybody. I was so angry. It took me a long time, and it was in my adolescence when I realized I wasn't alone, that there was a movement out there, and that there were books that I could read, and women that all over that were feeling like me, and they had an articulate language to express it. And that changed everything for me. But it took a long time.
Mm-hmm. So you write very passionately in the book about some of the ways that you feel that society still needs to change, even after all those years since that time and all the changes that have come, the ways that the things that still need to happen before women can be safe and free and equal in our society. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those things that you talk about?
Well, what is the goal of feminism? Let's define it first. It is a philosophical position. It is a struggle against the patriarchy. And the patriarchy is male dominance, a system that gives male dominance over women and other men as well. And it covers everything: religion, economy, socially, cultural, in every way. And women started to rebel against this a long time ago, asking for the vote first. And then it evolved into what we know today as women's demands. But we have not defeated the patriarchy. What is the final goal? The final goal is a management of the world in which men and women have equal numbers and have equal power. And it is a system, a culture, a civilization in which feminine and masculine values have the same weight in the society. We are a long time away from that, but we have come a long way. So I will not see the end of the patriarchy in my life, but maybe my granddaughters will. So every generation pushes the movement forward. And this is a revolution. And when women can come out in the streets and protest, they are pushing history. Mm-hmm. And that for me is fantastic. The fact that I've been able to witness this from the beginning to what's happening today with the Me Too movement.
That's another one of my favorite parts of the book that you just touched on. There's a line in the book where you say, I want to light the torches of our daughters and granddaughters with mine. They will have to live for us as we have lived for our mothers and carry on with the work we didn't have time to finish. I get chills when I read that quote. What would you say to girls and young women when they read this book? Like, what do you want them to take from it?
Talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be alone. Women alone are very vulnerable. When we get together, we're invincible. Mm-hmm. So yes, we are. So that's why men fear when women get together. Even when we get together for tea, they are sort of trying to listen what we're talking about, because probably we're conspiring. We usually are. So they're right in that sense. Get together. And this is a struggle that we do with joy. It's joyful and it's sexy. There is nothing dark about it. Of course, it's a war against the patriarchy, but that's a joyful war. It's like a carnival. We are going to win, but we are going to win together, and dancing and singing and loving and having children and sex. All this we can have, but keep on fighting for us and for our sisters who have less education, less privileges, less rights. Many of them have nothing. And we have to fight for them. So I keep telling young people, my granddaughters, because my granddaughters sometimes say, they call me Mai, you're dated. You're so old. Feminism is over. No, it's not over. And you will see when you go out into the workforce that it is not over. So I keep telling them, just keep fighting and do it joyfully.
Well, I felt very inspired reading the book, and I felt like I wanted to tell my daughters the same thing. So I know that message will come through. So just as a final question, since we're talking to librarians across the country in this video, I wanted to ask you what libraries mean to you.
A lot, because I have been an avid reader all my life. And in the house where I lived, there were all kinds of books, because I had an uncle who collected books. He stole them from libraries and from bookstores. And he had a black coat with big pockets where he would put the books that he stole. So the house was full of books.
Oh, no.
But they were all adult books. But I grew up with the library books, the library at school first. And then in Chile, which has gone through times of poverty and catastrophes and earthquakes and political upheaval and so much, libraries have played a role. There were libraries in buses that would go along the country doing what libraries do, lending books and then getting the books back in this eternal journey of going back and forth along the country. There is today libraries in the subways. So people pick up a book in one station and then 3 days later give the book back in another station. And everybody said they're going to steal the books, and actually they don't. So there is something wonderful about libraries and librarians who have the incredible power to guide a young mind in what the person will read and be informed of, and maybe how they think about life.
That's a wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much, Isabel.
Thank you.
We can't wait to share your new book with the rest of the world.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is McLeod Chapman, and I'm here with McLeod Chapman, the author of Whisper Down the Lane, which is coming from Quirk Books in April 2021. I have my copy too. Hi, thanks so much for joining us. I am excited to talk more about Whisper Down the Lane, but first I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
Well, first off, thank you very much for doing this. Thanks for having me out in this virtual landscape. My name's Clay, and I am originally from Virginia, born in Roanoke, raised in Richmond, but now I live in Brooklyn. New York has been home for probably like a little over 20 years now. And I've been really, really lucky to write pretty much my whole life. I love writing short stories, short fiction, which led to novels, which led to film, which led to comic books, which led to musicals. I mean, you name it. I've at least tried it and failed miserably at it at least once, if not twice. But writing has been something that has been really, really important to me. Telling stories, kind of grew up around that campfire, and you know, having the oral tradition kind of be a part of my kind of creative DNA from a really, really young age, and it has, you know, hopefully kind of transposed itself onto the page, which is where a lot of my kind of storytelling centers around. Like I love the idea of kind of spinning a yarn.
Yeah, I mean, it shows in the remaking for sure. I mean, you even open your first horror novel, the remaking opens with a campfire scene. So I think that's really apropos. But tell us a little bit about Whisper Down the Lane.
Whew, here we go. Whisper Down the Lane it's really kind of intriguing to me because it's like almost a personal story. Like I wanted to come from a place when I started to kind of embark upon the writing of this novel. I'm a dad, and fatherhood became a very kind of pertinent, kind of palpable, terrifying thing for me. You know, I guess I should say that Whisper Down the Lane is about, it kind of centers itself around the satanic panic era of the 80s. I am a child of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. I was raised by a television set. It was kind of the you know, the ground noise, or the kind of white noise in the background of my upbringing, where you never get into vans, stranger danger. That was there in our kind of neighborhood lifestyle. But I wanted to kind of tell a story that kind of revolved around that kind of paranoia and panic of that time, where we have a little boy named Sean, and Sean gets kind of caught in a white lie. And that white lie kind of ripples out and ripples out and ripples out until it kind of consumes the community that he lives in, and his family and his friends and his classmates and the people and the teachers that teach at his school. And it, in essence, kind of kickstarts this massive panic of that era. Now, fast forward 30 years later to a man named Richard, and Richard basically has no past. His childhood is a bit of a empty blank slate, but certain things are kind of starting to happen in his adult life now that he's a father. He's newly married. He teaches at a school. He's an art teacher, and certain kind of scary, slightly terrifying, unnerving things begin to happen around him. And I don't think it's giving away too much, to say that the stories of Sean and the stories of Richard start to kind of intersect in this strange satanic panic helix of paranoia and spookiness. I don't want to give away too much beyond that, but we'll see the two parallel narratives kind of intertwine with one another until they maybe smash into one another. But yeah, that's Whisper Down the Lane in my most eloquent way to describe it.
That was a great description of it. It really is fascinating. So you talk about the Satanic Panic and how, you grew up in this era. Can you talk a little bit about some of the research you did, because you have the child version of what you grew up around, but I'm sure you had to fill in the blanks.
Yeah. I mean, having grown up in that period, it was always kind of there, kind of in the background or on television. But when it came time to kind of sit down and kind of properly explore the era and kind of revisit it as an adult, I stacked up on all the kind of books that I could find of the period that kind of explored the period. Did a deep dive thanks to the library. And luckily there are a lot of books kind of written about this period. Primarily the one that kind of served as my big go-to was this book called We Believe the Children. And it was by this fellow by the name of Richard Beck. He came out in like 2015. It's an amazing book, exhaustive, like no stone is left unturned, but it really kind of explores the era and how this could happen. Someone who reads Whisper Down the Lane, they might say, this couldn't happen. This is not true. There's no way that people would actually do this stuff. But it's true. This really happened. And I think it's books like We Believe the Children, which is nonfiction.
Yeah.
It basically kind of lays down the kind of groundwork, the kind of moral fabric of the period, and says, this is how it happened, and this is why it happened. There are other books that kind of came out at the time. There's a book properly called Satanic Panic by this guy, Jeffrey Victor. This is an amazing book by Lawrence Wright called Remembering Satan. Truth is always going to be stranger than fiction. And these books will prove that, I could whip up these kind of flights of fancy, but when you read these nonfiction books, it says, nope, this stuff really happened. And then there's books like Michelle Remembers, which I don't know if you're familiar with this book. It kind of borders on, it's published as nonfiction. And I think there are many advocates who will still say it's nonfiction, but it kind of it kickstarted a lot of this the panic of the era, and it was by Michelle Smith and Lawrence Pasdar. I think I'm saying that right, Lawrence Pasdar, and it is a artifact of the era, and I would wholeheartedly recommend Michelle Remembers. And then I could go on and on, but the last one that I feel like really needs to get its due is Rosemary's Baby. I am a huge Ira Levin fan, and this book kind of served as my like spirit animal, my literary spirit animal, I guess. Okay. I needed to pay homage to the Godfather, Mr. Levin.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. Whisper Down the Lane will be out in April. Have a great day and enjoy Midwinter ALA Virtual.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, this is Jen Monroe, Senior Editor at Berkeley, and I'm here to introduce the amazing Jasmine Mans, author of poetry collection Black Girl Call Home, a March Berkeley paperback. As someone who has a minor in poetry, I do a ton of lurking online for up-and-coming poets. So about 4 years ago, it was impossible to miss Jasmine Mans's viral video of her poem, Footnotes for Kanye. I swear I'm responsible for at least 100 of the 600,000 views. Jasmine is a competitive spoken word poet who draws large crowds and has been featured on HBO and opened for the likes of Mos Def and Janelle Monáe, and has been called our new favorite poet on the internet by Nylon, and someone who will send chills down your spine by Glamour. Her poems are intelligent, ferocious, and full of heart. Hello, Jasmine.
Hi, Jen.
Thanks for joining us.
I'm excited to be here. Nervous, but very excited to be here.
Same, I feel that. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
You know what? I thought that was going to be the hardest question. I was like, I just wrote a whole book and I still don't know who I am or much about myself. So I guess it's good to start there. I'm figuring myself out. I'm a Black girl from Newark, New Jersey. I'm a writer. I am a queer woman. I am my mother's daughter. And I'm a storyteller, and in more ways than one.
Now, can you give us a brief overview of what readers can expect from Black Girl Call Home?
Oh, wow. A brief overview. I believe that it is going to be a wealth of emotions to be experienced. I think that the book is about, like we say this all the time, it's about leaving home, but not only like leaving your home, but actually leaving self and rediscovering self. And it is a coming of age narrative. It's like identifying daughterhood and being a really sucky daughter, and identifying these emotions that we feel when we realize that we are not like our mothers or are just like our mothers. And then what does it feel like when your body doesn't feel like it belongs to you? When we reach that point, like when every girl reaches that point in her life, when she feels like she doesn't quite belong to herself, or she doesn't quite belong to anybody. And so I think that people can expect these moments in this journey, and there's so many a wealth of patterns of Blackness and Newark, and these things that are unique to that narrative that I found so important to put into the text. So I hope it's a fruitful and exciting experience for the reader.
It definitely is, at least for me. You know, I've like cried reading your poems, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what inspires you to create. Tell us about your process.
Yeah, I'm not committed to one process. I can tell you that. Like, I'm not. There are things that fall upon my heart to write where I feel like this is my charge and I must speak upon it. That there are certain things that belong in the canon, certain narratives of Black women, of women of color that belong, that I have to speak upon. And so when I talk about specifically about Newark, or the sterilization of women of color, or so just many things, those things are very, very valuable. I truly forgot the question that you asked me. I'm so sorry.
No, what inspires you to create? And you're telling us about your process.
Yeah. And so like okay. So it's like there are specific things that I feel like I'm charged to talk about as a woman of color, as a Black woman, as a woman from Newark, that fall upon my heart that I feel like are very, very valuable. And then there are pieces of poetry that I try out to exercise my mind, to exercise color, coloring language. There are things that I write to remember moments in myself, not so much to create this beautiful narrative. And so I think it's not even about so much the process of being a writer, but the lived experience of being a poet, right? Where it's just like everything, there's poetry in just about everything. And in order to remember that, we have to access language. And so I'm trying to be less of like a master of the craft and more of a student, and just simply allow myself to access language in a way to kind of just first, right, remember myself, and then to tell a bigger narrative.
I know this is going to be hard, but can you pick a poem to read for us?
The funny thing is, I picked a poem, but I don't think it's short enough.
Go for it. We have time.
All right. Dear ex-lover. This poem is Dear ex-lover.
Yes, I love this one.
Dear ex-lover, I promise I'll stop chasing your memories and my dreams. I'll stop bringing your name up over cups of coffee, muffins, and loneliness. I'll marry a man and I'll lay my heart on his chest like red roses on mahogany caskets. And I'll have his daughter, and she'll have eyes reminding me that God still believes in second chances. If she ever decides to date a woman, I'll love bravery down her spine. I'll be reminded of all the times we loved like there were expiration dates tattooed on our inner thighs. I'll tell her to watch out for women whose silhouettes remind her of roadblocks, to run when she kisses dead skin that reminds her of dead ends if she ever comes home, with eyelids like cracking levees, bruised kneecaps, and a heart full of question marks. I will hold her like my mother never held me. I'll clasp her face in my palms like the New Testament on Judgment Day. I'll remind her that true love is the passion that allows you to do the right thing, that no human is strong enough to play coaster to a half-empty heart. Dear ex-lover, if my daughter ever feels like she's alone, as if she is not a hand-me-down fabric pulled out of the depths of her mommy's closet, I'll remember your name and I'll mumble it under my breath. And when she asks me, what did I say? I'll tell her that I know what it's like to drag a woman out of a cold war, then being too worn to clean up the battlefield it has made of you. I'll tell her that your heartbeats sound like gun shells tripping over battered cement. I'll tell her that I know what it's like just to want somebody to remember you. And apologies are like oxygen masks on hijacked planes. Forgive yourself before you dare forgive the person lying next to you. I'll tell her, never regret loving in permanent ink, that scars only give your stretch marks something to gossip about, that stop signs and fraternal twins are lost in the pits of open roads and hollow chests. Dear ex-lover, if my daughter's mirror is ever too unfamiliar, if she is ever too prideful and embarrassed to run in her mama's arms, I'll pray that she has friends with hearts filled with thousands of fireflies who are not too cool to pray with her, who would tell her to stop looking for the light at the end of the tunnel and to find God in the darkness. I think I'll stop it there. It's much longer, but I think we'll stop it there. But that's Dear Ex-Lover. That's one of my dearest pieces, actually, to my own heart.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine. And Black Girl Call Home everywhere March 9th, 2021.
Oh my gosh, can you believe it?
I can't. It's coming right up.
I cannot believe it. And I'm grateful and excited. And I am in complete disbelief that this moment is about to come.
Hi, I'm Jordan Pavlin. I have the honor of being Maggie Shipstead's editor at Knopf, and I'm so delighted to be here today to talk with her about her astonishing new novel, Great Circle, which all of us at Knopf think is a masterpiece, and we feel it's going to be the must-read book of the year. Hi, Maggie.
Hi, Jordan.
Hi. Okay, so first, can you just tell us a bit about this amazing book?
Yes. Great Circle is the story of Marion Graves, who's a pilot who disappears while trying to fly around the world north-south, so over the North and South Poles in 1950, when such a thing would have been extremely difficult. And it's also the story of a modern day movie star named Hadley Baxter, who is coming out of a major scandal, and kind of in a bid to reclaim her legitimacy, she gets the role of Marion Graves in a biopic. And after that, she gets sucked into this question of what really happened to Marion, what does it mean to ask what really happened to someone, and sort of these more existential questions about the nature of storytelling and representing someone's life. And the book actually starts before Marion's birth in about 1909. So it follows her all the way through World War II, when she flew transporting military planes in the UK. So there's a lot of plot and a lot of different places, and a lot happens.
And it's a total page turner from page one. And one of the things I admire so much about the novel is its vast geographical canvas. I mean, it moves from Montana to the Pacific Northwest, to Europe, to the Arctic Circle, and beyond. And I wonder if I could ask you to talk a little bit about your own travels and how many of your expeditions and adventures were conceived as research for this book.
Sure. Yeah. I think the word for the time when I was writing this book, which was, really started in the fall of 2014. And now the relationship between my personal travel and the writing of the book has been really symbiotic. I started writing a bit for travel magazines in sort of mid 2015. And I started pitching places that would help me in the book, places that I wanted to see. So I felt like I could represent Marion's journey more accurately. And so then I got a couple of those assignments and sort of developed a reputation as someone who had background in the polar regions and liked adventure travel. And so then more assignments came. So yeah, I've been to Antarctica twice in this period, and to the Arctic, I think 5 times. I haven't been on the Antarctic ice sheet, which figures into the story, but I have been on the Greenland ice sheet, which is a similar visual in that you're standing in this just perfectly flat disk of uninterrupted white, and it's just white and sky. And it's this sort of scale of it is something I couldn't have imagined until I saw it. And then I spent 2 months in Montana, just kind of living on a mountainside with my dog. I spent some time in Alaska on assignments. So yeah, it all sort of came together and snowballed, and places I happened to visit, like the Cook Islands, sort of found their way into the book in some minor ways. So it was really it made the process of writing the book sort of even more personal than it would have been otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And I think of the book in many ways as a sort of love letter to the natural world. But there's also a fabulous embrace of urban life in cities, Seattle, Los Angeles, London, and of course, flight. So I mean, it's the scenes where Marion learns to fly, and we see her piloting a plane for the first time, and then many times are so exquisite and full of wonder. And I would love to know, how much time you spent in small planes.
Not a lot. I think my appreciation for flight also grew a lot during this process, just reading about it and understanding it. My brother's a pilot. He doesn't fly anymore, but he's been in the Air Force for almost 20 years. So he was sort of a helpful source. And then here and there, I just picked up these funny little small plane flights. Like I was actually at an aviation museum in Montana, and these 2 guys were rolling out this 1927 Travel Air, and they kind of went, tell that lady she can come with us if she wants to go on a flight. So I went on this flight around the Missoula Valley, just completely by happenstance, in an airplane that I then used as Marion's, first plane that she learned to fly. And I went on a glider flight. I've landed on a bunch of glaciers sort of in sightseeing ways. And I always like the small planes because you can see what the pilot's doing. So you feel more engaged as a passenger. Although I've also, experienced a lot of wonder just looking out the window of commercial jets.
Mm-hmm. Last question. Great Circle has, as you described, these 2 unforgettable heroines, strong, amazing, iconoclastic women who rebel in many ways against society's expectations of them. I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit to this theme of autonomy and self-determination and female desire that runs through the novel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that theme emerged fairly organically just in telling the story of these people. And part of Marion's arc is that she has this really unfettered childhood. She's basically a wild, free-range kid in the teens and the 20s. And part of her struggle is as she becomes an adult, with this burning desire to become a pilot, she starts hitting all these obstacles that she didn't know existed. And so her story became a bit about just the commitment it takes to this dream of hers that allows her to get past the obstacles and make it happen, and how difficult it is and how many sacrifices it involves. And then with Hadley, this modern sort of celebrity figure whose life is, of course, wrapped up in her beauty and her body and all this public scrutiny. Her pressures are really different, but it's also like, what do you do beyond that? Like, how do you live an internal life as well as an external life? And she's sort of struggling to find meaning in a different way than Marion. Marion knows what she wants, Hadley doesn't. And how do you determine what you want? So yeah, I think their unorthodox lives take a lot of work, as is true in life.
Well, their journeys are utterly captivating. And again, I just think this is one of the most astonishing books I've ever read. And I'm so excited to bring it into the world, and so thrilled to see you today.
Thanks,
great.
Jordan. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Hello, librarians of America. I am Sarah McGrath, the editor-in-chief of Riverhead Books, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by novelist JoAnne Tompkins. Her riveting debut novel, What Comes After, will be released April 13th. It's an atmospheric page-turner about a tragedy that rips through a Pacific Northwest community and what it takes to forgive, transform, and create a new family. Already, O Magazine is calling JoAnne an American ton of French. Anne Napolitano, author of Dear Edward, loves its wisdom and grace, and Erica Bauermeister calls it a book for the ages. JoAnne has already had a storied career as a trial lawyer, judicial officer, and mediator, working with many families in crisis. JoAnne, welcome to ALA, and will you start by telling us how the mediation work you did for so many years informed your writing of this novel?
Well, first, thank you so much for that really nice introduction, and I'm really super happy to be here. As a mediator, I dealt with a lot of traumatized people, everything from quadriplegic 16-year-olds to death cases and all kinds of childhood abuse and even torture. And so I saw a lot of suffering, but what I also saw was a lot of resilience and people that somehow managed to survive things that I really struggled to understand how they survived. And sometimes not just well, but with a lot of grace and sometimes with forgiveness and love. And I wanted to explore that in my book. I wanted to explore people who, in my book, we have a murder-suicide of 2 teenage boys in a small town and the grief of the parents and the community. And I wanted to explore how you would recover, especially since there was betrayal involved. And one of the murderer was thought of as a son by the murder victim's father. And I wanted to explore those things and see how you could use suffering and loss as a way to move toward life and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see the influence of your work in this incredible book. I wonder if there was a particular case that you mediated that was an inspiration for the plot at the center of your story.
Well, not directly, but there was a case that I mediated some years ago that involved the murder of a football player, a high school football player, and he was murdered by 2 of his closest friends and teammates. And everything about that murder was very different than the murder in my book. But when I mediated that case, I was just really, really struck by the mom. And the mom thought of all 3 boys, including the murderers, even after the murder, as her children. And she hugged the parents of the murderers at their sentencings. And she was just so filled with grace that I was moved to kind of seek her out after the mediation. And I spent time with her. And what I discovered is that she was an ordinary person like all of us. She was flawed like we all are. Her grace that I saw at the mediation was very hard earned. I mean, she really suffered through some things, but she worked at it. And at times she would still have moments of bitterness and anger, but each time she kind of pulled herself up and she kept moving toward that because her heart felt better when it did that. And I wanted to do that with my characters. And Isaac in particular, in my book, the father of the murder victim, really struggles with that. But he really is working his way through it. He's a flawed human being. All my characters are, but they're all working their hearts are tight from their losses and they're all trying to expand their hearts through the course of the book. And I was very interested in exploring how that comes about.
Yeah, you do a wonderful job. I mean, I've said this to you before, but you know, the book begins with a dark with a tragedy, and it's occurred almost, you know, really before we've gotten there. And then the whole experience of reading the book, I feel like, is a sort of, I felt like I was traveling toward the light. You know, just sort of it's about healing. It's the, you know, and forgiveness and overcoming and finding a new way to live and find community. And I can see so much when you talk about that case. I can see the influence of the impression that woman made on you and how you've written both the father of one boy and the mother of the other child, and also the teenage girl who comes into their lives. And so much of the book is about healing. So I wonder, in all the cases that you've seen, is there something particular that allows a family or a community to achieve that kind of healing? How does that happen?
Well, you know, I've thought about that a lot over the years, and what were the characteristics of the people that seemed to heal, you know, the most? And it struck me that there were a couple things. First of all, they recognized their own suffering, but they were also willing to accept the genuine efforts of other people to make amends. And also, really importantly, they were able to see the humanity in the people that had harmed them. And that was often very difficult to do because some of the harm was pretty awful. But the people that were able to do that, that could see the whole being as opposed to the singular act that hurt them, seemed to be the most successful at finding their way through. And I feel like all my characters and what comes after are all struggling with that. They're all trying to see beyond the acts, the singular acts that caused harm to the person behind them, and to, as Isaac would say in his Quaker faith, that of God and everyone. And so it was a very interesting process for me to write it.
Well, you're so good at seeing the humanity in your characters and how they are so interconnected. And it's been such a pleasure to work with you and see how you view the world that way and how you bring that to this book. So I hope, I'm going to grab my galley here. I hope that everybody will give a read to What Comes After by JoAnne Tompkins on Edelweiss or NetGalley. Comes out April 13th. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.